Validations. According to my calculations, me plus you, baby, that's a love story in the making. All this heartbreak is heartbreaking. He broke your heart too many times, so I'm his replacement, yeah. But my heart is vacant, yeah. You never got the attention you needed, and that's why you needed more. You can see that I'm heartless, yeah, that's why I needed yours. You gave your heart to me and you said it was mine. You said that you can't deal with the lies or any compromise. You said I'm the problem. I got problems of my own. I got problems of my own. That's why I'd rather be alone.
Hello, everyone.
You told me I'm fucked up.
Welcome back to the Circle Club. I am here with the Marvel Man himself, Mr. Corey. Shout out to our boy Jay Roddy on the intro song there. What's up, my man?
What's up, Tyrone? Glad to be back, my man. Glad to be back.
3 years. 3 years.
It's been a while. It's been
Crazy.
a while.
Crazy, man. Let's not waste any time, brother. Let's jump right into it and start talking about this episode because this was crazy. So we opened this episode up, man, right back where we started, right back in the grind, the meat of everything here. And Loki is time slipping. He's jumping all over the place. He's trying to figure out who this Mobius version is. It seems like he's sort of in the past. Then he gets into the present. He's in the future, hopping all over the place. We reveal he who remains revealed to the TVA Council. A lot of stuff going on. And then we get that post-credit scene. Overall, I would say this episode was just about introducing to the TVA Council, to present day, what's kind of going on with this, the branches and the time slippage. I loved it. I love this episode. I thought it worked for me. It gave me enough mystery. Loki, what I loved about season one was they kept us in the dark, but it wasn't corny, it wasn't cheesy. It felt like, wow, this was really a mystery and we're part of that journey. What did you think about it?
I thought it was good because it just picks right up where we left off, right? Like, I think the one thing you never want to see is just like a lot of interpretation between seasons for me, because then it's just kind of filling you in as you go along. For me, I'd rather just see it and kind of get right to it. And for Loki to really hop right back into the chaos after what transpired at the end of the first season is exactly what you want to see in a moment like that. And for Loki, he kind of continues that urgency behind how serious this threat is and how it's going to be. And the TVA is kind of on their heels right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love too how, the way season one ended, it almost made you think we were going to be stuck in whatever universe that was. So I kind of like that they brought us back to our Mobius that we know, our B-15 we know. And they used I like the clever way that they used it where he would jump back and forth, but it would be in the same spot. So, even has you at moments at times making me think, in the future, we may be watching an episode where we're like, okay, is this the past? Is this in the present? And like, we're going to be in that same sort of confusion with Loki. And I think that's good as an audience member to be on that ride with the characters.
Yeah, I'm going to love that. Like, it's kind of like Christopher Nolan-esque in the sense of like kind of bouncing you between the future and the past and the present all at once. Right. So I think it's going to be an interesting ride as you go along. But I think it's good that it's established that nothing's really erased, even when Kang has been manipulating these employees of the TVA and erasing their memories. If you're not erasing those memories, there's always a track record to kind of what's been going on, and Obi's evidence of that with his memory obviously not being wiped for a long time, and then Loki coming back at the council and showing that mural of Kang.
Yes.
Right? So Kang can't really hide these footsteps either, no matter how much he thinks he has, right? So it's catching up to him as well.
Well, that's what I think is great about it. Like, we don't have a villain who is so OP where he's 17 steps ahead. That's like he has some slippage himself, right? I
Mhm.
think that was sort of the theme of this episode was slippage in time, people loose ends,
Mm.
sloppiness. I mean, even Kang leaving that message to Renslayer, like that was kind of sloppy of him because someone could have found it. But that's the thing with like some of these villains or antagonists that work so well. They think they're so smart that everyone else around them is dumb, that like that's where those errors start to kind of
Mm.
play and then fall in there on his heel steps there. One thing that I really also like too is like, man, the one criticism Marvel has had over the last few years is CGI, the visuals. I thought the visuals, the cinematography was impeccable, bro. I really did. I was like, wow. Like it felt like, when you're watching Andor and you're like,
Mhm.
whoa. Like it had that feeling to me where I was like, okay, we're back, and like
Yeah.
in all the CGI was very clean. I don't know, man. Like, what was your thoughts on that?
I think a good scene to just go look at is when they run a parallel to the first season when Loki's running out on that almost outdoor walkway and he's looking out to where you can see for miles and miles the TVA. And
Mhm.
that scene that looks so clean and for me that like requires a lot of detail. I think that exposed the level of intricacy that they wanted to put into a project like this, and explains why the budget's so high as well, right? They
Yeah,
kind of they didn't fall short on any of that stuff.
no, definitely. I don't think that there was any slippage there. I mean, overall, though, man, I just thought this is a strong first episode to get us back. And I think the thing that again, another criticism of Marvel is like, wow, I have to watch all 20 episodes, like movies. I want to watch, which
Mhm.
by the way is not true, but
Mhm.
that's always the criticism, the lazy criticism that people have. I like that with this, it feels like Loki season 1 and season 2 could just be their own thing. It feels like you don't have to had seen, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, WandaVision, all that. Like this is a
Mhm.
standalone sort of thing. And again, I just felt that they really nailed it, man. I really did. And I'm excited to see for this next episode.
Nah, that's a great call out. Like that's I think going back to what I said in my initial reaction and just like picking up right where we left off, not implying anything. I think that's where the MCU maybe has slacked in recent history. Like
Mhm.
just kind of making you have to go watch the other projects. I think the beauty within it is being able to stand on your own while also interconnecting at the same time, right? Which is
Definitely.
interesting with a
Definitely.
show like Loki, as we're talking about intertwining timelines.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
No, and
different.
I think by the time we get to the end, I think it's still gonna have some larger sort of ramifications and connections, as we saw at the end of Ant-Man. Was Ant-Man really out of that universe? Who knows? Like, was did Kang get set free? I don't know
Mhm.
if those large questions will be answered with this, but I don't think it matters because I think it's just going to be more expansion of Kang.
Mhm.
Um, and I like that approach. I don't think we need to have everything connect. There's definitely going to be a time and place for that. I think the thing people forget too about that first phase 1, 2 is that they really weren't connecting as much as people thought. Those were standalone movies. There was certainly they got to a point once we got to like the main Avenger movies, but
Mhm.
yeah, man, I think this standalone definitely works. What were some of the key moments that sort of stood out to you in this episode?
To me, it had to be the time slipping moment between Obi, Loki, and Mobius because
Mm-hmm.
that established, I think, something that we haven't seen before, and that was
Mm-hmm.
the whole aspect of Loki legitimately being able to go in the past, have a
Time
conversation with
travel.
Obi, and then instantaneously Obi remember these things in the future, right? So they're
Yes.
almost like it's going to show that the free will and choice is now established because the time is almost eh, allowing them to have these memories again because
Mm-hmm.
they're loose at the end of the day. And I think for us,
Yeah.
it helps us establish where we're also going with Loki and the precedent that's being
Mm-hmm.
set here versus last year.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that that was a really standout moment too as well. Obviously, you know, Ke Huy Quan was in Everything Everywhere All at Once. Kind of feels like the perfect sort of actor to kind of step in this role, to be someone who's
Nailed it.
playing, you know, different dimensions, universes, time. He just has that face, like his face just has that thing where he can kind of switch where it feels like he's in the past, present. So I think that was brilliant casting.
I think also for him, like it's something about it of like him being able to be down there for 400 years straight, not sleeping at all. Like he plays it off like he's actually been doing it, right? Like
yeah, right.
And he has like this perkiness about him. Like it's great being a part of a team, even though I haven't seen anybody in 400 years, and the last person I saw was you, and you don't remember me, right? So
well, that's one thing too, is like, you know, Renslayer and Mobius were talking in season 1 about, oh, we've been friends for eons. How could you do this? Like you gave this up for a couple of Lokis. Like they do a good job of showing how like 400 years is almost like, you know, a year to them, you know, and like that's how long they've been working. But I think the thing about Ke that works so well is he's an actor who can play something very serious, but then at the flip of the switch, just be like jokey and unserious. And I think
100%.
that's going to be perfect for this character and this trio going forward.
I think the humor too of it is like so more on brand with what
natural
you need to be doing, right? Like versus just these like punchlines and like so obvious. Like those things can come and have their place because again, those were things that like happened in the comics, right? But like I think when you kind of have that mixture of good writing, good acting, right, as we're kind of describing here, you can make that implied humor hit so much better than some punchline that you're just manufacturing at the end of the day.
Totally. Yeah, it didn't feel cheesy, didn't feel corny. It kind of felt earned, right? Like it just felt natural with the conversation. That's what we need more of, I think. Like you know, not to bring up the old movies too much, but like the reason you love Avengers and, you know, Iron Man and Thor and some of those movies is because it was natural with the character's personality, right? And I think to have someone like Ke come in and naturally just be this sort of silly, funny guy where it naturally fits, I just think it's a perfect fitting. But going back to the time slipping thing, I'm not sure, did they solve that at the end there? Or is that going to be something we're going to get more of going forward? Because if we're going to get something more of that going forward, if Loki can kind of control it, or maybe he gets Kang's science technology to kind of go back forth, that will be an interesting play, because then it's like almost a weapon, right? Like Loki can use that to his advantage to tell future Loki things that the past sort of is like, you know, fell apart on.
Yeah, I look at it in two different directions, right? It's either kind of exactly what you said in the sense of it being like this big important thing that like we're gonna find out more about, and they've only shown us a glimpse at its real importance to the story at hand and how it's going to benefit Loki. I think offshoot to that, if it's really not that important, what they did was use it to establish that the TVA has been around and that it's not just kind of reset per se, because I think that was a lot of people's questions coming out of the first season is okay, did everything just get reset and Kang's just like, which Kang is in charge now, right? And it was just like a replicated version of what we had saw in the first season, and that was not the case. And I think the time slipping with Loki kind of allowed us within this episode to allow it to transpire to prove that what had happened before isn't going to happen again, right? And the only way it can happen again is ultimately probably at the very end of Secret Wars, right? Where they like Loki kind of alludes to in this episode is like, is this ultimately what we were left with? Like, it might not sound like the best decision, but like this is just the best case scenario for us, right?
Exactly. And I went back to watch season 1, and like I really watched that final episode where Kang is like, you know, this is up for you two now. Like I've done my job, and she's like, well, you haven't given people free will. It's an interesting dilemma. It's like almost like a philosophical sort of idea. It's like, do you make these choices for people to maintain peace and safety, which is kind of, if you think about it, what the Avengers do, right? Like they are sort of being the judges, the gods of the world to kind of decide who gets to make what decisions. And it's an interesting like sort of proposition to think like this guy, like, was he a villain because he didn't give free choice, but he was also sort of protecting at the same time from even more chaos. I don't know, man. Like, I don't know what the solution is, because like I think about Secret Wars ending and I'm like, well, you kind of would have to have the Avengers basically do what Kang was doing to kind of get it all back together, right? So I don't know. It's an interesting dilemma.
Yeah, and I think like not to deviate from Loki at all, but like it all relates to all the questions that are happening. Is like, where is this leading to, right? Like, what's going on? You hear the rumors, right? Like, it allows you to have, in theory, a soft reboot, because they're basically establishing too within this episode that like, for the only way to gain control throughout the chaos that we're about to probably witness through the wars, the incursions, etc., is to have a controlled timeline. And within that soft reboot, you can take consistencies and not lose what you've built within your story, but also create a new story, because there's a new person leading that sacred timeline. There's new people that helped initiate that story to make it happen to what it is, right? So I think going back to even the first season of Loki, the importance of what we're gonna see within Loki season 2, even though it stands within itself, is going to send wavelengths throughout the MCU at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 1,000%. This is definitely going to be a pivotal show. It felt that way with season 1, 2. You could just tell, like, okay, this is, and no one's mentioned this, but Loki's the bridge of like the old and the new, right? I mean, and what's fascinating, I think, too, is that he was a villain prior, but now it's almost like he's. I don't remember the last time I've literally looked at Loki like, wow, he's a bad guy. It feels like he's been a hero, the past 3 years, 4 years. So, and even when he dies with Thanos, like in that moment, after all the sort of stuff they've been through, you're like, wow, that's how they have Loki go out. Like, it didn't feel right, And so this has been like a big redemption for him. One other thing I want to talk about with you, another key moment. So we see General Dox and X5. They have that little moment, and the camera sort of sits on it, almost like she's gonna hug him or kiss him or something, like it's her son or lover. What did you make of that scene?
I was extremely curious. The first thing I like instantaneously thought, where my mind just brought me, and I'll go off my gut here, is that they somehow already knew that they were pruned, and that they are part of the same family from the same timeline, and they came here together somehow. And now that the truth is almost exposed, they had some type of commitment towards the TVA having this control and pruning these timelines, right? And at the end of the day, it's very, I think, telling for them to have some type of I don't even know what to call that situationship right there.
Situationship, yeah.
To me, it looks like they came from the same timeline. That was just my initial gut reaction from and that they knew more than they were leading on in the moment.
That makes sense, my man. That makes sense. Yeah, I agree. I felt like they knew something was going on. The council itself was a bit odd. You had this woman sort of in like a wheelchair, another guy was like half asleep. It almost felt like those folks were put in place so that General Dox could have that power. It's almost like, when you think about like a corporation where they have like seats, right? And it's like they always have one or two seats that's like yeah, exactly. It's like the puppet, right? The puppet votes, right? And like that's kind of how those folks felt. And I was like, and then the fact that she kind of was like so tunnel vision of like, all right, let's go after Sylvie, like let's figure out what's going on here. That was an interesting sort of take to me too, that they just jumped to that. I think that those two, that is like either her son or some sort of kin to her, like you said, where they realized or figured it out, and she was like, well, you know what, we got to come here together. Almost maybe like what Sylvie did, right? Where Sylvie's like, I'm gonna leave to kind of find my own free will. Maybe they found their free will by being a part of the TVA, because time goes on forever, and like, they're following orders, but it's also sort of their decision to join.
Yeah, I think you bring up a crazy point that I didn't even think about, right? Like looking at it as an actual board and like the puppet votes and where Docs has that control. And I think it's a good direction to go, because when you think about the chaos and the vacuum of power, so to speak, in the moment, these individuals within the TVA, I think it's very natural to have a group of individuals faced with the truth and almost deny it, right? Like it's almost so on Disney to like try to throw reflections of the real world into their projects, and not to go there, but like I'll allude to it, because that's ultimately what they're doing, and it's truth, and that's why it's interesting too, right? Because now you have this faction within the TVA who's almost loyalists to Kang, and they want to see this continue, and they want to turn a blind eye, and they want to just kind of prune out the person who exposed everything so that we can just get right back to what we were doing before, right?
So one thing she said, and to echo that, one thing she had said was, she was like, even if it was wrong and they misled us, maybe they had a good reasoning for it, or like a good point for it, right? And so that was sort of her argument.
Yeah, and that's a crazy thing about when Marvel is at its peak, is when its villains, its bad guys, almost like somewhat do make sense, and they do have like that bailout, right? Like obviously there's no bailing out Thanos wanting to snap half of people's existence in the universe, but the way they position it, right, is different. The way He Who Remains positioned it is different, right? And I think that's where it kind of leaves you with the question marks of like, what is the right answer by the end of this? And that's and we don't, right? And like I think that's where you want to be as 100%. A fan, not knowing, because when you do know, you get No Way Home, and you know exactly what's about to happen, right? Great movie, even better if I didn't know what was going to happen at the end of the day, right?
Exactly. So, and that's what you want it to be. You want it to be in a spot where you're like, okay, I kind of have an idea or gist of where it may go, but there's going to be some twists and turns, and I'm not sure what the journey's going to be like. And that's, to me, that's what makes Loki such a special project, is that they have that. We're going to get into predictions in a moment, but one other key moment that stood out to me was this moment between Renslayer and Kang. They sort of alluded to it last season, that maybe there was some relationship there. Maybe, Kang is her, or Renslayer is Kang's lost lover, or something like that. Like, did you pick up on any of that sort of energy this episode with the recording?
I mean, definitely. Like the recording to me was interesting, because like it felt like an intimate, like secret recording. Like it wasn't even meant to be heard in a sense, right? But like now, but the way they positioned it to Loki was, it was definitely meant to be heard, right? So like that's the initial reaction I got off of it. Like I felt like Kang had left it there for Loki, which got me thinking like, yo, like, is this still part of the story? Like, why is this here? Why is he getting fed this seed here that's so clearly important? And like it like, to me, it was handed as a clear driver, right?
That's a great point. So if you think about it, what do they show us right before? So they show that council with that private conversation with Loki, right? And that was sort of to kind of make us go, okay, these recordings are private, but they're recording everything. They're listening to everything. We know that the TV is always listening, right? And so, as you said, how could or why could Loki kind of see that? But when he sees that he's in either the past or the future, we don't know, right?
I think he's in the past, because he had the mural behind him, and the mural was in the past.
So I'm thinking, it's interesting, because I'm thinking maybe it's future. I'm thinking that maybe a version of Kang, a good version, let's say, or maybe a version of Loki, put it there in the past so that when he gets to the future, he would see it. And this is where this time slipping thing is so fast. Like it's just so dope to me. That is like it really opens a lot of a can of worms, man, because anyone could have put that there. And if because it changes, right? If that was the past, it changes sort of the like reasoning versus if it
Yeah,
was the present.
we're basically watching Memento right now. Like, was that Loki who left it there to teach himself this
That's a
in
great.
the
That's a
future?
great analogy.
Or like, was it Kang? Because this is still a written story and he's still in control, but it's just a different version of him. Like, that's the crazy thing about this is like, I don't think it's a part of the story, but like it quite possibly still could be a written story, and then we're just like living in a loop right now, which would be the craziest thing in the world.
So you think we're going down the yellow brick road right now potentially?
I truly, the more and more, I think we'll see more and more as Loki 2 goes on. But like, if we're gonna roll into predictions, which I think this is a great transition point for a
great segue for predictions. Absolutely, yeah.
I personally think. I think Kevin Feige's pulling the rug on all of us. I think he literally is bringing us right down the yellow brick road. I think by the end of Secret Wars in a couple of years, Loki's going to end up there in the same spot with another Kang. And the only thing that might be different is that Loki is the one controlling that sacred timeline. And that's where it allows the soft reboot to then in turn allow the story to change and be different.
Whoa! So wait, you think Loki is potentially the big bad guy in the end?
No, I don't think he's the big bad guy. I think he will end up in the spot with He Who Remains.
Oh, okay. At the end of time.
But they will actually take that throne. I think we are going down a yellow brick road though here. Like we're going to see a lot of repetition, a lot of like it's crazy to me right now.
Well, what's interesting, yo, is that you mentioned, bro, is that like, yeah, it and I kind of want them to go that. It's like I want to see it the same, like go down that same path, but then that's the whole point. We're branching, right? So how does those branches change stories and like what does that affect with the future? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I just think that there's a lot of potential for them to just play with different things, man. Like with the branches of timelines, and you know, if we get more time slipping, I really hope we get more of that time slipping, man. Where do you think Renslayer is right now? Do you have any predictions for that?
You know what? I gotta think that if there's a recording, they're within some type of time period with technology, right? And I think we've obviously seen the trailer with him like way back in time doing his little show, whatever it was.
Right, little magic show.
I don't think it's that far back. I think you're looking at something that's probably in like vintage era, something like 70s, 80s, like maybe picking right back up where we saw in season 1, and Renslayer is going back to that school, right? But I think it's got to be somewhere relatively within Kang's ascension to becoming like the Conqueror. So I think it's got to be early on at some point in some early timeline. That's all I can boil it down to.
Interesting. I like that theory. At the end here, we get this post-credit scene, right? And we see Sylvie, so we know this is a pruned universe. Which, I mean, maybe I missed that in the first season. I don't really recall them saying that there was universes pruned. I remember they saying that people got pruned. I didn't know like whole universes could get pruned. But so she's in a pruned universe, and the whole idea or goal is that she will have her own free will, make her own free decisions and choices. Talk to me about that. Like, what do you think we're going to see from Sylvie going forward?
Yeah, I think there's 2 layers to that. The first part is like, we always thought it was pruned people, right? Like, is there pruned universes? Like, I think that was something that we kind of like overlooked a lot in the first season. Like, what happened within these universes where like you took the Loki out of it? Like, there's people who talk to Loki, who are family with Loki, who are friends with Loki. Like, what happened there? Like, how does that not mess up the timeline within that universe, right? So, like, that's something I actually want answered and explored here moving forward. I'm gonna just get that on the record now. But I think if we're gonna play that out as if the universes were also pruned in that situation, To almost like the memory of that individual. Like you think about, like I think about like Hermione pulling a spell on her parents and them just like forgetting her in life, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe that's how it works, and if that's how it works, then like those universes aren't being monitored. But like, where would they be sitting? Like, it's just like a big question to me. I think I interpreted it more so as Sylvie is kind of on the loose and she's not being monitored because everything is in chaos again, right? So you're not just seeing this spike and this variant in 1982 Oklahoma, right? Because it's not the only thing that's happening, right? Everything is kind of array. So it's almost like the rules of season 1 where she had to hide behind apocalypses isn't scenario anymore. Everything's like the apocalypse, so she can kind of just go wherever. So it makes it difficult to find her in a sense, which allows her to have that free reign, which I don't think she's going to do that, obviously. I think she's going to end up wanting to get back with Loki and find some way back to him.
Right.
I think that was obvious with her looking at the couple sitting there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we got the crazy McDonald's promos in here. Clearly Marvel is trying to get an extra couple bucks, and that pandemic kind of hurt the box office.
Happy Meal toys, what are they looking like? I might have to drive down there and see.
I know, right? Yeah, get a little collectible, but yeah, I'm thinking, man, like I feel like she's gonna be, working at McDonald's and hanging out as we saw, right, in some of those promos. I think she's gonna get bored of that pretty soon, pretty quickly, and realize like, dang, I was wrong. But the really big thing that Kang had mentioned, or he who remains had mentioned at the end of first season to her was, he's like, Loki, do you even think that Sylvie is capable of trusting people, right? And then that's when she makes that decision to, snatch our hearts away, where she turned on our boy Loki there. These birds, man, in the streets. And it's and now I think this is sort of her dilemma. Is like, how does she learn to trust people?
I think it makes sense though, right? Like, because not to get into like that lane, but Loki was the first one to take that step in trust, right? Like he wasn't jumping the gun. He was literally just sitting there, like he even says in this episode, like, I just wanted to think about it. Like, that's all. I was just trying to sit there and think about it, and she didn't want to do that. And I think she kind of just jumped off her emotions, which is I think a very natural trait coming from that lane of the gender pool, which I think she's regretting a little bit in a sense, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of sinking in the reality of the situation for her. But I think ultimately it's going to be a short stop, because I think it would be a hilarious move if they just made it that she had no money and she just got all these things on the menu. So now she's just like working it off, right? Like,
right.
Like, and like Loki finds her, pulls up in episode 2. He's like, "What are you doing here?" She's like, "Well, I kind of got everything, and I'm trying to work it off, right?" It would be like such another humorous thing, which would be like hilarious, because again, you could just like bounce out of there whenever you want. It's no sweat off your back, which I think would help establish too the type of character she's trying to become at the end of the day, right? It's like that turn of Loki going from the bad guy to the good guy, and I think Sylvie hasn't really fully made that turn yet, because again, she offed He Who Remains, right? Like, I think our Loki has gone through that journey clearly, but Sylvie hasn't. And I think this season ultimately might be the season of Sylvie making that turn, and then them finally coming together, and then from there, within a season 3, actually like kind of attacking the problem,
like a dynamic duo.
Correct.
Yeah, because that's a great point. Because our Loki, he's kind of gone through that journey of like, one is the loneliest number, and that's kind of where she is right now. She's sort of like a step in her maturity or maturation, like behind the Loki that we know or that we've been following. So it's definitely, that sounds pretty accurate. Just to close this out here, my man, what are some predictions that you have for this next episode 2, season 2 here?
Well, I think I just got into a non-serious prediction. So you guys got that with the McDonald's build at Silvio's. I think for the next episode, we have to. I think we're gonna have to dive into them trying to find each other. Like that's the only thing that makes sense to me. Like if we're picking up where we had left off, the most important thing where we had left off and what they had built up between Loki and Sylvie was like their situation together. They hint at it with the end credit scene
elevator
playing to that. They do it with the elevator, right? So I think no matter what, the situation at hand is getting Loki and Sylvie back together. Now that Loki has apparently fixed his time slipping situation, as it seems.
Yeah. One thing that they do really well with Loki that almost irritates me as an audience is you're watching it and it's like that phone's ringing and it's ringing and it's ringing and you're like he's slowly going closer. You're like, yo, answer the phone, bro, please.
Yeah, like
answer
Matrix.
the phone.
I was getting Matrix vibes out of that. I was like,
that was heavy. That was a heavy Matrix reference. Yeah,
I was expecting somebody to be the operator on the other end, just being like, "Yo, the stick is behind the door." Like,
right.
Strap the stick behind the door. Like, I thought that would have been a crazy little like reflection to the Matrix or shout out to the Matrix, but apparently not.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely some sort of Matrix nod there. With the, I mean, it just was right on cue. But yeah, man, like that scene to me, like it made me just kind of go, who was on the other line there? Was that Morbius? Was that Mobius? Was that our boy Obi that we just met? Was that Sylvie? And then all of a sudden, Sylvie pops out of the elevator. So I think this next episode, I want to sort of explore some of these decisions that Loki's made on his own. Maybe, I don't know if you do that through a flashback, maybe he tells Mobius. But I want Mobius to be also kind of caught up to speed. It kind of feels like, it makes sense, right? Loki has been through a lot. It's traumatic. It's crazy, right? There were moments where him and Mobius, I'm like, yo, can you catch him up to speed? Can you catch him up to speed?
Yeah.
But in the heat of things, he's time slipping. He's losing his mind. He's like, what did I just experience? Bro was just with the Avengers a couple weeks ago, in New York, and has gone through this crazy journey over the next 14 days.
My God.
So it's been a lot. It's been a lot for him. So I want Jess for the next episode. I think if I had to make one prediction, it's that Mobius and him kind of catch up to speed. We know that General Dox is going after Sylvie. They know that because Hunter B-15 heard that, right? And there's also that other sort of rogue guy who pruned Mobius, who I think he feels bad now, so he might be on this journey with us too. I think this next episode, yeah, you're right. They're gonna try to find Sylvie. Mobius is gonna get caught up to speed, and I think Obi somehow is gonna be involved in this next episode. With that machine and going behind when they went behind the door with everything, I think we're going to see some sort of results of what happens there.
I think Obi is just extremely important because he hasn't had his memory wipes at the end of the day, right? He has some knowledge just lurking there with him that I think is going to be useful, and he clearly knows how to build things, right? So I think he's our little tinkerer for the season.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point. And also because he, like you said, because he knows to build things, he understands the manual. He wrote the manual. If you wrote the manual, you know the rules. You know how the game is played. You need that Coach Bill Belichick, on your sideline to kind of have the rule book, know it inside and out. I like this team we have right now. And we talked about it last season too, how B-15 was a strong character, and like an interesting character. And we saw B-15 have that moment with Sylvie last season too, where she kind of realized and had her sort of awakening. I think we're going to get a lot more awakening. My final question for you: do you think in this season, the TVA members, the people who actually work there, do you think it's going to be revealed to them that, they're all variants and that they all sort of are puppets essentially?
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to happen at some point, right? I think it's going to go back to what I was saying. People are going to divide up the way they divide up, right? I think you're going to have those rogue people that are loyalists and they're going to be okay with it, and they're going to be like Renslayer. They're going to find their way back to Kang in a sense, right? Like Kang needs to have his little crew too, his little insiders, right? It's like his own little Hydra, so to speak, within the TVA. He is the creator of it. So like if you're gonna work and your life's gonna be built around the TVA, there's gonna be individuals that are just gonna attach to the original founder of it in the sense, right? That's what they're gonna look at as that.
Absolutely.
And I think there's going to be that faction that is out there that's with B-15, that's with Mobius, it's with Loki. And I really don't see them staying there. I see them finding their way out and detaching themselves from the TVA in a sense, right? Which in a sense makes it seem like the loyalists win, but I think the majority of them will find their way back out into a different scenario and not continue the engine, so to speak, and continue.
Perfect. Yeah, and then it like you said, it sort of becomes divided teams, kind of all for one for the TVA versus let's take down the TVA, let's go down this new path. And again, it's such an interesting moral dilemma because if they decide not to essentially do what He Who Remains has done, it invites all these other kings in. It gives free will, but it creates chaos. It creates secret wars, which I think that's kind of where we have to end up, right? So, like, it kind of makes sense that everyone kind of goes with this free will path, but they're gonna have to try to find a way to defeat all these kings, because otherwise, it would. There are no other kings that are gonna come, but I think it almost feels like this episode almost felt like we almost lost Loki right there, right? So it feels like that's kind of their way of saying like the stakes are rising, people will be gone, people will die, you're gonna lose characters, and the Secret Wars is happening is going to be intense. We're gonna start to see these guys lose over and over and over again. Which I don't think we've gotten a lot of in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. A lot of times our heroes kind of come out on top. Sure, we have some deaths here and there. I think over the next phase, we're going to start to see a lot of losses. And what's fascinating about that, too, is, and this is why I think Feige may be a genius, Feige knows how people have been reacting to some of these superheroes, right? Like they haven't been nearly as in love. Some people really love him. Like, I really like America Chavez. Other people go, oh, what a stupid character. Some people really like Falcon or new Captain America. Other people are like, that's not my guy. So it's very divided right now, right? And so to make it where these guys or girls, whatever, these characters lose, the audience kind of goes, see, man, this is why we need the new event. This is why we need the old Avengers. This is never going to work out. So when we get the old Avengers to come back and we kind of get a mix of the crew, it's all going to come together. It's all going to come together. You're going to start, like, anyone who's not for Falcon being Captain America, by the end of it, they're going to be like, man, that's my guy. Anyone who's like, oh, America Chavez, wow, that's a crazy power. Doctor Strange, wow. This Miss Marvel movie we have coming up, man, or the Marvels, I think we're going to go out of it and go, okay, I like these characters more than I thought. I think that's kind of the goal of this next phase. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think the important thing is these movies. It's kind of going back to what we talked about before, like having these properties be able to stand on their own, tell their own story, but also intertwine and connect and like increase the value of what we've seen before, right? Like I think that's where the MCU is at its best, right? Like Endgame is only as good as all those projects before it that they could feed off of, right? And I think when you are moving in this direction, like you think about the Marvels, you think about like Miss Marvel finally getting projected up onto the big screen, right? Like you need to find a way to have her be this entity that can come across and like capture this new audience and convince them to then go back and then have these things when they go back be able to have more increased value with the new content that they've seen by going like from future to past in a sense, because that's how they're going about it, and that's what like Loki is all about, is right, like this past, future, present, like where does it all intertwine? And I think that's where the MCU can be advantageous, is being able to execute and then go back and watch something and say, wow, you know what, like I didn't realize that, right?
I didn't appreciate it. Yep.
They kind of actually did tease this thing. They did kind of allude to this, right? Like, and that's where the multiple rewatches and like the Easter eggs and the in-depth do matter because it adds to the story at the end of the day, right? And that's what we want. It shouldn't be needed, but it's needed to have long-term value, and that's where the MCU, for us at least, is why we keep sticking around, why we have faith, because
absolutely
it has that rewatch value. There's more things for you to see and find out and realize that you weren't paying attention to before.
Absolutely, man. All right, man. Episode 1, season 2. If you have to give it 1 rating, you know I like to do my 5 rating. You do 10. What's your rating on your scale here?
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a solid 8.8. It was a very, very good episode. Liked a lot of it. Picked up where we left off. I didn't think it brought me like crazy excitement, but it was an extremely enjoyable episode, without a doubt.
I'm right there with you. Probably a 9 on your scale, 4.5 out of 5 on my end here. I think it was, I had pretty low expectations going into it. Not because I love season 1, but I just was like, I don't know where we are in the Marvel universe right now. I don't know how temperatures were. This is a pandemic project, and I was satisfied with what they did. I think we're heading in the right direction. There's enough mystery. I like the introduction of these new characters that we got so far. And I just think, I would be very, very disappointed and shocked if this series doesn't turn out to be a strong series for them. Just based on the fact that we've gotten mystery. And I think the best thing you can do in storytelling is provide mystery for your audience to kind of go down that journey. But yeah, man. Appreciate you coming on. We'll be here back every Thursday. You can listen to us on Spotify and some other spots. Loki season 2, The Circle Club, Corey T. Rose. We back, baby. You know how we do it, my man. Corey, thanks for coming on as always. And my boy J. Rod is going to take us out.
Too many times, so I'm his replacement, yeah. But my heart is